The room fell silent the second she walked in. No one else noticed the shift, but he did. Kellan Dorsey's hand froze mid-air, his pen hovering above the paper. As his gaze locked on the woman standing across the boardroom table, 5 years. 5 long years since she'd walked out of his life without a word. Now she was here, confident, composed, wearing that calm expression that once made him lose control. And for a man who built an empire out of logic and control, the sight of her was chaos. Talia Monroe, the one mistake he never stopped regretting. She met his stare and didn't flinch. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady. Her eyes held no warmth, no trace of the girl who once laughed at his late-night sarcasm. He cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair as his team shifted uncomfortably. "You're leading the presentation?" "I am." Her tone was clipped, professional, detached, like he was any other client. No one in the room knew their history. No one knew that 5 years ago, that same woman had been the heartbeat of his nights and the reason he stopped believing he could be loved. But Kellan knew, and every word that came out of her mouth now was a reminder of what he lost and destroyed. She began her presentation, voice even and clear. "At Monroe Branding, we focus on revitalizing legacy companies through authentic storytelling and visual cohesion. Our goal is to help Dorsey Tech reconnect with its audience post-acquisition. By shifting from product-first to people-first messaging, her firm, her rules, her world." He didn't move, didn't speak. He watched the woman who once whispered dreams into his ear talk about strategy like she'd never whispered anything at all. And yet, when she looked up to switch slides, their eyes met for a second too long. Something flickered. Recognition, memory, regret. But she broke it first. "Shall we continue?" He forced a nod. "Please." The rest of the meeting went flawlessly. She was articulate, commanding, and unshakably poised. When it ended, she gathered her materials, thanked everyone, and walked toward the door. But before she could leave, his voice cut through the silence. "Talia." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I didn't know you were in San Diego. That's by design," she said softly. And then she left. The sound of the door closing echoed longer than it should have. For the first time in years, Kellan Dorsey couldn't think his way out of something. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where every story reminds you that love doesn't always end where the pain begins. If you've ever walked away from someone who once meant everything, this story will speak to you. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, it walks right back into the room, wearing confidence and holding your unfinished business. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what happens next between Talia and Kellan will leave you questioning what forgiveness truly means. 5 years earlier, New York City. Talia Monroe didn't believe in shortcuts, not in life, not in love, not in success. She had learned early that hard work didn't always promise stability, but it gave her peace. Raised in Baltimore by her grandmother after losing her parents at 8, she grew up with a quiet kind of strength. The kind that doesn't shout but never bends. Her grandmother used to say, "The world will never give you what you deserve, baby. So take it. With grace, not anger." That sentence became her compass. By 27, Talia had built a reputation as one of the sharpest product strategists in the city. And when Dorsey Tech, one of New York's fastest-growing tech firms, offered her a role, she didn't hesitate. Her first day felt like stepping into another world. Glass walls, quiet corridors, people who spoke in data and dollars. And at the top of it all, him, Kellan Dorsey, the 32-year-old founder with a reputation for brilliance and frost. He didn't smile much, didn't waste words, and didn't seem to notice anyone unless they added value to his company. Talia didn't plan to notice him either. She was there to work, not to admire the man who made boardrooms hold their breath. But life has a way of laughing at plans. Their first meeting was supposed to be routine, a product launch review. He walked in without greeting anyone, scanned the slide deck and said, "Half of this reads like marketing fluff. Who wrote it?" The room went still. Talia lifted her chin. I did. He looked up then, for the first time, and something about the way her voice didn't tremble caught his attention. Then explain this, he said, tapping the screen. She did, calmly, logically, with conviction that silenced the room. When she finished, he leaned back slightly. Not bad. That was the closest thing to a compliment anyone had ever heard from Kellen Dorsey. From that day, he started calling her into meetings no one else was invited to. It wasn't favoritism, it was precision. He challenged her ideas until she sharpened them into steel. And somehow, between the late nights, coffee stains, and debates that stretched into dawn, something shifted. He started noticing the way she smiled when she solved a problem. She started noticing the moments he forgot to be cold. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was electricity, quiet, unspoken, undeniable. One night, after hours of brainstorming in his office, she pushed back her chair and sighed. If I stay any longer, I'll start billing overtime. He glanced up from his laptop, the faintest smile touching his lips. You already do. Her heart skipped. She laughed it off. You're not funny, Mr. Dorsey. Then why are you smiling, Ms. Monroe? That night, she stayed an hour longer than she should have, and when she finally left the building, her chest felt heavier and lighter all at once. She didn't know it yet, but that was the night her world began to tilt toward him. The night logic started losing to emotion, and the beginning of the story that would one day break her and test every piece she rebuilt. The next few months blurred into late nights, caffeine, and quiet progress. Talia's work began speaking for itself, organized, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Her name started circulating through the upper floors of Dorsey Tech, and while most whispered admiration, a few whispered envy. But none of that mattered to her. What mattered was the man who always seemed to appear the moment she thought she had everything under control. Kellen. He never hovered. He never praised. He simply noticed every detail she thought no one cared about. One Thursday night, she was fixing a presentation deck when the door to the strategy room opened. She looked up to find him standing there, one hand in his pocket, his expression unreadable. You're still here, he said. So are you, she replied, not looking away from her screen. He leaned against the table. Do you always work this late? Only when the deadline's real and the coffee's strong. He gave a small, almost reluctant smile. I see. Silence followed. Not awkward. Charged. Talia saved her file and closed her laptop. Is there something you needed, Mr. Dorsey? He hesitated. Then you challenged one of my managers earlier, the one from operations, because he was wrong, she said calmly. I know, Kellen said. That's why I came down here. She frowned. To correct me? No, he said. To thank you. The simplicity of it threw her off balance. He wasn't the kind of man who handed out gratitude like candy. He wasn't the kind of man who handed out anything. Her throat tightened. You don't have to. I do. His voice softened. Most people agree with me out of fear. You don't. Maybe that's because I'm not afraid of you, she said quietly. He met her eyes then, steady and sharp. Maybe that's what I like about you. For a second, neither spoke. Then she cleared her throat and reached for her coat. Good night, Mr. Dorsey. He watched her go, but didn't move. When the door clicked shut, he whispered to the empty room, Good night, Talia. Over the next few weeks, they slipped into an unspoken rhythm. They'd meet in meetings, disagree in front of others, then share quiet laughter after everyone left. He'd send her late-night emails filled with red-marked edits and small notes that made her smile. She'd reply with suggestions, her tone firm but warm. What started as mutual respect turned into something harder to define. She began looking forward to the sound of his footsteps approaching her desk. He began staying longer after she left, rereading her notes, and wondering when her voice had started lingering in his mind. One night, the city was wrapped in winter fog when they found themselves alone in his office again. The rest of the team had gone home hours earlier. Talia was reviewing a report while Kellen sat across from her, quietly observing. The silence was thick, comfortable, then suddenly not. You should rest, he said finally. I will, she murmured, not looking up. He tilted his head. You said that 2 hours ago. Her lips curved slightly. Then I'm consistent. He smiled. A real one this time. The kind that softened the edges of his face. Something inside her shifted. She closed her folder and met his gaze. You're different when you smile. He paused. Is that a compliment? An observation? His eyes lingered on her, then dropped to her hands. You're different too, he said softly. When you're not pretending to be made of steel. She swallowed, heartbeat quickening. Who says I'm pretending? He stood slowly, walking toward her desk. I can see it. The way you hold everything in, the way you try to be untouchable. Maybe that's how I survive, she said. Maybe that's how you hide, he countered. Their eyes locked, tension rising like a tide neither of them could stop. When he finally stopped in front of her, there were only inches between them. The air felt different. Talia, he said quietly, almost as if testing her name. She stood still, refusing to step back. You shouldn't. I know, he murmured, but I want to. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to move away. She didn't. His hand brushed her jaw, his thumb tracing the faint tremor of her skin. Her breath hitched. Then, before logic could catch up, his lips met hers. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was the kind of kiss that asks permission and takes its answer in silence. When it broke, she stepped back first. Her voice was barely above a whisper. This never happened. He nodded once. Then we both won't remember it. But both of them did. The next morning she arrived at work early, hoping to bury herself in tasks. He walked in minutes later, nodded professionally, and moved on like nothing had happened. Neither spoke of it, but the distance only made the pull stronger. In meetings, his eyes found hers when he shouldn't have been looking. In hallways, his steps slowed when she passed by. It was inevitable. One late Friday evening, after everyone had gone, she was finishing up a report when the power flickered briefly. She laughed quietly to herself, shaking her head. Even technology gets tired in this building. He appeared at her door a second later. Still here? You say that a lot, she said with a smile. He leaned against the doorframe. You make it easy. She turned back to her screen, pretending to ignore the warmth in his tone. Some of us work for a living, and some of us work to avoid thinking, he said softly. She froze. He had hit a nerve. When she finally looked at him, her eyes softened. And which are you? He stepped closer. Both. The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. He reached out again, but this time she didn't stop him. Their lips met once more, longer, deeper, filled with everything they hadn't said. When they finally parted, she whispered, "We'll regret this." He nodded. Probably. But neither of them stopped. Days turned into weeks, and their secret grew in the spaces between meetings and late-night strategy sessions. He was careful, discreet. She was cautious, but she loved harder than she meant to. In his penthouse, they were two people stripped of titles and power. He'd pour her wine while she teased him for never eating takeout correctly. He'd listen when she spoke about her dreams, her grandmother, her plans to someday start her own firm. And in those quiet moments, he almost believed he could be a man without armor. But love inside power rarely survives honesty. The first crack came one evening when she overheard his name in the hallway. Two senior managers talking, laughing softly. One of them said, "You know why he's been pushing that strategy team so hard? He's sleeping with one of them. Keeps her loyal." The other laughed. "Guess loyalty's good for business." Talia froze. The words sliced through her like glass. She waited until they walked away, then turned the corner and saw Kellen himself stepping out of his office, phone to his ear. His tone was low, clipped. "She's loyal because she believes in what we're building. It's not manipulation, it's motivation." Pause. Then came the words that ended everything. "Besides, keeping her close keeps her focused. It works." Her body went cold. He didn't see her standing there. He didn't know she heard, and she didn't wait for him to find out. That night, she typed her resignation email. No explanations, no accusations, Just a single line. Thank you for the opportunity. Effective immediately. She left her access badge on his desk before sunrise. By the time he arrived, she was already gone. No note, no trace, no goodbye. When her train pulled out of New York, she pressed her forehead against the window. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and grey. She thought about everything she'd given, her trust, her time, her heart, and how easily he'd turned it into strategy. She didn't cry, not then. But when the train reached Baltimore and the city lights faded, she finally did. Her grandmother picked her up at the station without a word. Just a hug strong enough to hold her together. Baby, her grandmother said softly, sometimes the people who break you are the ones who teach you how strong you are. Talia nodded. Then I guess I'm about to learn. Love never began with a plan. It started quietly, like a habit neither of them meant to form. After that night, Talia and Kellen didn't talk about what had happened. But silence has a way of becoming permission. The next time they stayed late in the office, he brought her coffee without asking how she liked it. She took it without looking at him, pretending not to notice that. It was the exact blend she always ordered from the cafe downstairs. By the third week, she didn't pretend anymore. Their world became a secret. Boardrooms by day, his apartment by night. To everyone else, they were colleagues. To each other, they were something they couldn't name yet, something fierce, addictive, and dangerous. At first, it was easy. He'd send her emails with too many edits just to have a reason to talk. She'd reply with dry humor that made him laugh, something his board rarely managed. When they worked late, he'd sit across from her, quiet but attentive, the sound of his pen tapping against the glass table in rhythm with her typing. Sometimes he'd look up and say, "You're wasting your talent here." She'd glance at him, half smiling. "Then promote me. I'd rather keep you close," he'd say softly. She'd shake her head, pretending it was a joke. But it wasn't. Neither of them were joking anymore. One Friday evening, the city was drowning in rain. The streets below their building shimmered in silver light as thunder rolled above Manhattan. Talia was standing by the window, her blazer draped over the chair, the glow of the city washing over her. Kellen stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, watching her reflection. "You work too hard," he said. "So do you. That's different." "How?" He hesitated. "I don't know who I'd be if I stopped." She turned, studying him. "Maybe that's the problem." He smiled faintly. "You think I'm a problem?" "I think you're scared to be a person when no one's watching." That caught him off guard. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked toward her, stopping close enough for her to feel the quiet heat of his presence. "What about you?" he asked. "What are you scared of?" "Needing someone I can't have," she said softly. Their eyes met. He didn't ask permission this time. He leaned in and kissed her. The first kiss had been restrained, careful. This one wasn't. It was slow, deep, and certain. The kind that doesn't ask questions, it gives answers. When it ended, she stayed still, her forehead resting against his chest. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know," he said, his breath rough against her hair. "But it feels like the only thing that isn't." And that was how it began. Their weekends disappeared into hotel suites and conference trips. She learned how he took his coffee, how he stopped answering calls after midnight, and how silence meant he was thinking about something he didn't want to say out loud. He learned that she hummed when she worked, that she preferred quiet mornings, that she wore her heart like armor and didn't realize how much it showed. Theirs was not a loud love. It was deliberate, measured, hidden behind professionalism and glass walls. They never discussed what it was or where it was going, maybe because naming it would make it real, and reality was messy. But one night, as they lay together in the dim light of his penthouse, Kellen reached for her hand and said, "You're the only thing that makes sense when nothing else does." Her chest tightened. "You say that like I'm temporary." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe because I don't know if I deserve you permanently." She turned to face him fully. "Then try." He smiled faintly. "That's what scares me." At work, they returned to silence. He was the CEO again, sharp and unreadable. She was his strategist, focused, articulate, untouchable. But behind closed doors, they forgot about power and titles. In his office late one night, she leaned over his desk, tracing a red line across a proposal draft. "This section is weak," she said, pointing. He leaned close behind her, his voice low. "So, fix it." "I already did," she said, glancing at him. Their faces were inches apart. He smiled. "Of course you did." Her hand trembled slightly as she moved away. "You can't keep looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're trying to remember how it feels to breathe." He didn't deny it. "Then stop making it this easy," he murmured. She exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. "You're impossible." "So are you," he said, and kissed her again. But the higher the climb, the harder the fall. Talia started noticing changes. He became distant at times, colder. Phone calls he wouldn't explain. Meetings she wasn't invited to anymore. She told herself not to care. It wasn't supposed to matter. But late at night, when he rolled away in bed, she felt it. The gap between who they were and who they pretended to be. One night, she asked quietly, "Are you ashamed of me?" He froze. "What? You hide us. You act like I don't exist outside of this apartment." "Talia." "Don't," she said, standing up. "You built a world where everyone knows you, respects you, fears you. And I'm not even a name in it." He looked at her then, truly looked. "You think I'm hiding you," he said slowly. "I'm protecting you." "From what?" "From people who'll never see you as my equal. From people who'll use you to get to me." She folded her arms. "Then let them. I'm not your secret, Kellen. I'm your choice." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how this world works." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "No, I understand perfectly. You care more about control than about me." He didn't answer. The silence was worse than words. She left that night before dawn, vowing not to come back. But she did. Because love like that doesn't break overnight. It fades one boundary at a time. A week later, she was back in his office, pretending nothing had happened. He didn't look at her during the meeting, but when everyone left, he said, "Stay." She froze. "For what?" "For 5 minutes." She hesitated, then nodded. He closed the door and stood across from her, his eyes tired. "You were right." "About what?" "Everything," he said quietly. "I'm scared of what you make me feel." Her throat tightened. "Then stop running from it." He walked to her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You make me forget I'm supposed to be in control. Maybe that's not a bad thing." His hand lingered on her cheek. "It is for me." And yet, he kissed her anyway. For a while they were happy again, or at least they pretended to be. Business trips turned into stolen weekends. Meetings ended with texts that said, "Stay." But it was fragile. The kind of happiness that cracks if you breathe too hard. Talia didn't see it coming, the conversation that would destroy everything. She didn't know that a single sentence could erase months of quiet love. All she knew was that Kellen was late that night, and when she called his office, she heard laughter through the door. Male voices. Familiar. Confident. Then came the words that changed everything. "You're sleeping with her?" Kellen's voice, calm but cold. It keeps her motivated and loyal. The laughter that followed was louder than thunder, and that's when the silence between them finally broke. For good. The laughter from behind that glass door didn't stop. Talia stood frozen, hand on the handle, heart hammering so loud she could barely hear. Every word felt like a knife sliding deeper. "You're sleeping with her?" It keeps her motivated and loyal. Motivated, loyal. Words that stripped every ounce of tenderness from what she thought they had. She waited for him to correct it, to defend her, to say no, it's not like that. But Kellen didn't. He chuckled instead, a low, careless sound. "It's complicated," he added, his tone businesslike. "But it works. She delivers." Her throat went dry. He said she delivers like she was a quarterly result. She stepped back, clutching her folder so tightly the edges cut her palms. Her breath hitched, but she swallowed the sound. She couldn't cry here, not in this building. not where glass walls turned emotions into gossip. So she turned away, quietly, carefully, and walked straight to the elevator, leaving behind every piece of herself that ever believed in him. Her apartment felt colder that night. The city outside was alive, horns, rain, noise, but inside, it was just her and the silence she couldn't escape. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, watching the clock tick past midnight. Her phone buzzed twice. "Kellen, still working?" "Kellen, you forgot your notebook again." She stared at the screen until the light faded. Then she powered it off. By dawn, she had already packed 2 suitcases. A resignation letter sat open on her laptop, short and clean. "Thank you for the opportunity." Effective, immediately. No explanations, no closure. She printed it, signed her name, and slid her ID badge on top of it. Then she walked through Dorsey Tech one last time before the sun came up. The office was dark, quiet, empty. His door was open, of course it was. He never locked it. She stepped inside. The smell of his cologne still lingered, sharp, expensive, familiar. Her fingers brushed across his desk once, tracing the grain of the wood, where she'd once leaned while laughing, while dreaming, while trusting. She placed the envelope in the center of the desk. Next to it, her company badge, and beneath it, a sticky note. 2 words, "I'm done." By the time Kellen arrived at 8:30, she was gone. Her desk cleared. Her computer logged out. He didn't notice at first. Not until his assistant walked in holding the envelope. "She left this," the assistant said. Kellen took it, frowning. "What do you mean, left?" "She resigned. This morning." For the first time in years, he didn't have a ready answer. His mind went blank. He called her phone, straight to voicemail. He sent a message. No reply. When he checked her apartment that evening, the landlord said she left early. Said she was going home to family. And that was it. No goodbye. No confrontation. Just silence, where there had once been fire. Talia's train to Baltimore felt endless. She sat by the window, watching New York shrink into a blur of glass and steel. Her chest hurt, not from love, but from the humiliation of realizing it had never been love to him. At least, not the way she thought it was. She pulled out her phone once, hovering over his number, then deleted it. When the train stopped at Penn Station, she stayed seated. Only when it began to move again did she finally exhale. The city she'd built her dreams in was gone. All that was left was the woman she had to become. Her grandmother was waiting at the station when she arrived. Warm eyes, steady hands, the kind of love that didn't ask questions first. "Baby," she said softly, wrapping Talia in her arms. "What happened?" Talia tried to speak, but the words broke in her throat. So she just said, "I'm tired." Her grandmother nodded, holding her tighter. "Then rest. The world can wait." That night, Talia sat by the kitchen window, watching the rain fall against the glass. The house smelled like vanilla and lavender, the same way it always had when she was a child. Her grandmother sat across from her, knitting. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said gently. "But tell me this. Did he hurt you or teach you?" Talia looked up, eyes wet. "Both," her grandmother sighed. "Then make sure the hurt doesn't become your home." The next morning, Talia woke up early and walked to the small bakery down the street. The same one she used to work at during college. The owner recognized her immediately. "Look at you," he said with a grin. "Back from the big city. How's the empire?" She smiled faintly. "Collapsed." He laughed softly, not knowing how true it was. She spent the next few weeks in Baltimore, sleeping, cooking, reading old books, and pretending she didn't miss him. But at night, she did. No matter how much she tried to forget, she could still hear his voice, feel the weight of his touch, remember the way he used to look at her when no one else was watching. It wasn't the love that haunted her. It was the betrayal of realizing she was nothing more than a strategy to him. One afternoon, she walked into the living room with a sketchbook and started drawing brand ideas, logos, fonts, mock-ups. She didn't know why. Maybe she just needed to feel useful again. Her grandmother peeked in. "What's all this?" "Something new," Talia said quietly. "For me?" "What are you calling it?" Talia looked down at the first page of the sketchbook. She wrote 2 words in bold ink: Monroe Branding. Her grandmother smiled. "That sounds like a fresh start." Talia smiled too, for the first time in weeks. That's the point. Months passed. She built her first website using borrowed templates. She pitched small businesses, coffee shops, and community centers. Slowly, clients came. She started to breathe again. Every project helped her remember who she was before Kellen Dorsey, a woman who could build something from nothing, a woman who didn't need to be chosen to feel worthy. Sometimes she caught herself thinking of him, what he was doing, whether he missed her, but she never let those thoughts stay. The man she once loved existed in a chapter she'd already closed. Or so she thought. One evening, as she packed up her office in San Diego, her new home, her new life, her phone buzzed. A client referral, a big one. Her heart raced as she opened the email. "Congratulations, Ms. Monroe. You've been shortlisted to lead the full rebranding of one of our key acquisitions. Company, Dorsey Tech." For a moment, she just stared. Her hands trembled. Her throat tightened. Then she laughed softly, half in disbelief, half in irony. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. She sat back in her chair, heart pounding. Her assistant poked her head in. "Everything okay, Talia?" Talia nodded, forcing a calm smile. "Yeah. Just déjà vu." That night, she walked along the beach, her phone lighting up with details of the upcoming pitch meeting. Her hair whipped in the wind, her mind spinning with everything she thought she'd buried. Kellen's face, his voice, that boardroom, that door. She stopped, watching the tide roll in, then whispered, "I'm not the same woman anymore." And she wasn't. She had rebuilt herself from silence, shame, and second chances she'd never been offered. This time, if the past came knocking, she'd be the one holding the handle. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If the person who broke your heart walked back into your life, 5 years later, would you forgive them? Or make them feel what you felt? Drop your thoughts below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because Chapter 3 will show you what happens when pain meets power. 2 years later, San Diego. The ocean outside Talia's apartment glowed gold beneath the morning sun. Her desk faced the window, covered in sketches, brand boards, and coffee cups that marked a long night of work. Monroe Branding had grown, quietly, steadily, beautifully. Her first year was survival. The second, expansion. She hired a small team of designers, built client relationships that trusted her instincts, and earned enough to finally exhale. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind often. "Don't chase what broke you, baby. Build what heals you." That's what she did. She built a life filled with purpose and peace. A life without him. Her mornings started with coffee and client calls. Her afternoons were for brainstorming sessions with her team. 3 people who believed in her the same way she once believed in him. She had rules now. No overworking. No attachments. No entanglements with anyone who made her heart forget logic. Her friends teased her about it constantly. One afternoon, her assistant, Naomi, leaned over her desk. "You need a vacation. I took one last month." "You went to a branding conference, Talia. It had a beach," she said, sipping her coffee. Naomi grinned. "You watched the beach from your laptop." Talia laughed, shaking her head. "Fine. Maybe I'll take one when the next project wraps." "When is that?" "Never," she said lightly. The truth was, she wasn't ready to stop moving. Stillness gave memories room to breathe, and she'd learned the hard way that some memories don't deserve oxygen. That evening, she joined a networking dinner at a downtown restaurant. San Diego's business scene was smaller than New York's, but it had its own rhythm, warmer, more personal. She was halfway through her second glass of wine when the conversation at her table shifted. One of the investors said, We're finalizing the acquisition of a New York-based tech firm. It's a big one. Talia's attention flickered. Which firm? Dorsey Tech, the man said proudly. The CEO's a genius. Bit of a mystery, but the numbers are remarkable. We're planning a full rebrand once the deal closes. Her pulse skipped. She hid her reaction behind a polite smile. That's ambitious. They've had a strong corporate identity for years. Exactly, he said. We need someone who can humanize the brand, make it less robotic. Talia nodded slowly. That's an interesting challenge. He smiled. You should bid for it. The idea hung in the air, uninvited and unwanted. She forced a soft laugh. Maybe, but inside, her heart had already started to race. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her balcony, listening to the waves crash against the rocks, her laptop open beside her. She typed the name she hadn't searched in years, Kellen Dorsey. The results came fast. Tech conferences, charity events, Forbes profiles. He looked older, more composed, still intimidating, still untouchable. She stared at one photo, him on a stage, speaking into a mic, wearing that same expression she used to know too well. Calm, controlled, unreachable. She closed the tab. Not my world anymore, she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. 2 weeks later, her company got the email. Subject, Monroe Branding, shortlisted vendor proposal. Client, Dorsey Tech, new division. Location, San Diego headquarters. Date, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Naomi squealed when she saw it. Talia, this is huge. Talia's heart pounded. It's an opportunity. An opportunity. Naomi gaped. This could put us on the national map. We've been chasing contracts half this size for years. Talia nodded, forcing calm. You're right. Let's get ready. She smiled outwardly, but her chest felt like it was closing in. Her past had found her, again. The night before the meeting, she stood in front of her mirror, testing her outfit. Black fitted suit, clean ponytail, minimal makeup. Confidence was the goal. Control was the disguise. She rehearsed her introduction 3 times, then shut off the lights. But sleep didn't come easily. When it did, she dreamt of glass offices, cold voices, and a man who once made her believe she mattered. Tuesday morning, she walked into the downtown building, where the pitch was being held. The air smelled like polished marble and corporate power. Her team followed behind her, crisp and focused. The receptionist smiled politely. Good morning. The Dorsey Tech team will see you now. Talia inhaled slowly, adjusting her blazer. Thank you. The elevator doors opened to a sleek boardroom overlooking the city. She stepped inside, and the world stopped. He was there, Kellen Dorsey, sitting at the head of the table, older now, sharper, still magnetic in the quietest way. For a second, he didn't move. Then his jaw clenched. Talia? Her heart thudded once, hard, but her expression stayed steady. Mr. Dorsey, she said calmly, shall we begin? The presentation went perfectly. She delivered every slide flawlessly, her voice even, her logic sharp. She didn't flinch when he spoke, didn't stumble when he asked questions, didn't let her eyes linger on him longer than necessary. It was professionalism at its purest and its coldest. When the meeting ended, her clients applauded. The deal would take weeks to finalize, but everyone knew she'd nailed it. Everyone except her. Because as she packed her files, he stood slowly and said, "Wait." The room cleared. Her team left. It was just the 2 of them again. "I didn't know you were in San Diego," he said quietly. "That's by design," she replied. He hesitated. "You look different. 5 years will do that." "Talia," she cut him off. "This meeting was professional, Mr. Dorsey. Let's keep it that way." He nodded once. "Of course," but as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her again. "I never meant what you heard." Her breath caught. She turned back slowly. "You used me, and I let you." There's nothing left to say. Then she walked out. Her steps were steady, her heartbeat not. Behind her, Kellen stood alone in the quiet room, staring at the empty doorway. And for the first time in his career, he didn't know what to do next. That evening, Talia sat by the ocean again, laptop closed, glass of wine untouched. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the water. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Kellen, I need to explain. Please, one dinner, off the record. Her thumb hovered over the delete button, but instead, she locked the screen and whispered, You lost that right 5 years ago. Then she set the phone down and watched the last light fade from the sky. Calm, quiet, alone. She told herself she was okay. She almost believed it. The following morning at Monroe Branding started like any other. The sound of printers, coffee machines, and casual laughter filled the small office. Talia sat behind her desk, reviewing a campaign proposal. Her eyes were on the screen, but her mind wasn't. Every sentence she read blurred into the memory of yesterday's boardroom. The look in Kellen's eyes wouldn't leave her. Surprise, regret, something else she didn't want to name. She tried to shut it out, focusing instead on the work that had kept her sane for 5 years. But the knock at her door broke the illusion. Naomi peeked in. There's someone here to see you. Talia didn't look up. Tell them to schedule an appointment. Naomi hesitated. He said, It's personal. Talia's fingers froze mid-type. What's his name? Naomi's voice dropped. Kellen Dorsey. The words landed like a weight in her chest. For a second, she couldn't move. Naomi blinked, sensing the tension. Should I tell him you're busy? Talia stood slowly, straightening her blazer. No, I'll see him. Naomi nodded and slipped out. Talia took a breath, steady, deliberate. Then another. When the door opened, he stepped in like a storm held behind a calm face. Black suit, rolled sleeves. The same quiet dominance that used to disarm entire boardrooms. But this time, it didn't disarm her. Kellen, her tone was measured. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said, closing the door gently behind him. But you wouldn't return my messages. That's intentional. I figured, he said. Still, here I am. Silence filled the space. He scanned the office slowly. The framed photos, the plants, the warmth that his world never had. This place suits you, he said finally. It feels like you. Meaning it's small? She asked. Meaning it's real. She crossed her arms. Say what you came to say. He nodded, stepping closer. I owe you the truth. About what you heard. Her jaw tightened. You think truth fixes everything? No, but lies destroyed enough. Talia exhaled sharply, trying to stay composed. You said I kept you motivated, loyal, that it worked. His expression darkened. That wasn't about you. You were talking about me. I was talking to someone I couldn't trust, he said quietly. A board member who was trying to push you out. He accused you of being a distraction. I needed him to believe you weren't a threat. So you confirmed it, she said bitterly. You let him think you were sleeping with your employee for loyalty points. I was trying to protect you, he said. By degrading me. His shoulders stiffened. By keeping you safe in a room full of men who wanted to ruin you because you outshined them. Her eyes burned. You didn't protect me. You humiliated me. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low. I know I did. And I've lived with it every day since. Don't, she warned. Talia, don't say my name like it still belongs to you, she snapped. He stopped. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat neither wanted to admit they still shared. He turned away first, running a hand through his hair. You think I didn't look for you? I did for months. I called every contact, checked every firm. You vanished. That was the point, she said quietly. He faced her again. You left without a word. What was I supposed to say? Thank you for teaching me that love has terms and clauses. His voice broke slightly. You didn't even let me explain. I heard everything I needed to, she said. No, you heard what hurt, he said firmly. Not what was true. She flinched. The conviction in his tone rattled her more than his apology ever could. He exhaled and moved toward the window, his reflection cast against the city beyond. When I saw you yesterday, I didn't know whether to speak or just let you finish and leave. You should have chosen the latter. I couldn't. He turned around, his eyes softer now. 5 years later, and I still can't. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, he said quietly. I came here because I needed to tell you I never stopped thinking about you. Not once. She froze. His words carried none of the arrogance she remembered. No control. No calculated phrasing. Just a man stripped of his defenses. And that scared her more than the heartbreak ever did. She turned away, gathering the papers on her desk to avoid looking at him. This conversation is over, she said. It's not, he replied. It is for me. He took a step closer, his voice low. Then why are your hands shaking? Her throat tightened. You don't get to read me anymore. He smiled sadly. I never stopped. She dropped the papers. You need to go. Dinner, he said suddenly. Just one. No business. No agenda. Just one night to talk. I said no. He hesitated, searching her face. Then I'll wait until you say yes. Her patience snapped. You think persistence erases what you did? You think time softens betrayal? He shook his head. No, but it shows you who tried to grow after it. She swallowed hard, her voice quiet now. You have no idea how hard I fought to feel whole again. His gaze softened. I do, because I fought to become someone worthy of the woman I lost. She blinked, caught between anger and disbelief. You talk like redemption is a choice. It was, he said, and I made mine the day you walked out that door. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she stepped back, her voice low but steady. You're late, Kellen. Whatever you're trying to fix, some things don't glue back together. I know, he said, but sometimes they grow stronger at the cracks. Her breath caught. He stepped closer, stopping just inches away. Dinner. Tomorrow. 8. Kellen, if you don't show, I'll understand, he said. But I'll be there. He turned, walking toward the door. Before leaving, he glanced back once. You look good, Talia. Happier. I was, she said. He nodded, slowly, accepting the hit. Then I'll see if I can earn the right to make you that way again. Then he left. When the door closed, Talia exhaled shakily and sank into her chair. Her chest felt heavy, her thoughts louder than they'd been in years. Naomi peeked in a few minutes later. Everything okay? Talia nodded, though her voice cracked. Yeah. Just old business. Naomi smiled. Must have been important. You look like you ran a marathon. Talia forced a laugh. Something like that. When she was alone again, she stared at the window. The city lights reflected against her glass office wall, warm and distant. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown. Tomorrow. 8. Rooftop grill. No suits. No business. Talia's thumb hovered over the delete button. She should have deleted it. She should have erased everything that still tied her to him. But her hand didn't move. Because buried beneath the anger was something else, something she hated admitting. Curiosity. What if he had changed? What if she hadn't? She set the phone down and whispered to herself, "You're not going." But deep down, she already knew she would. The next evening, Talia told herself she wasn't going. She repeated it while brushing her hair, while picking out a dress, even while glancing at the clock for the 5th time. By 7:30, she was still pacing her apartment. By 7:45, she was in her car. Old habits die harder than pride. The rooftop restaurant overlooked the ocean. Soft lights lined the terrace, and the hum of quiet jazz mixed with the sound of waves far below. Kellen was already there. Black shirt, sleeves rolled, tie gone. He stood when she arrived, hands in his pockets, eyes steady but unreadable. She wanted to hate how effortlessly he wore calm, how time had only made him sharper, more controlled, more dangerous to her peace. "Talia," he said, his voice low. "Don't sound relieved," she said, pulling out the chair opposite him. "I'm only here because curiosity's a terrible habit." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that." A waiter approached, breaking the tension. Kellen ordered wine. She asked for water. When they were alone again, she crossed her arms. "Say what you came to say." He studied her quietly. "You look stronger." "That's not an apology." "No," he said softly. "It's the truth." For a moment, they just watched each other. The air between them was full of the things they never said. "I didn't come here to fix the past," he said. "I came because I finally understand what I destroyed." She raised a brow. "And what was that?" He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "The only person who ever saw me for who I was before the title." "Don't do that," she said sharply. "Don't turn this into poetry. You made your choice, Kellen. You lied. You let me walk out that door without a word." "I froze," he admitted. "You left before I had a chance to explain. You had 5 years." He nodded slowly. "And I spent them regretting every one." She looked away, the city lights blurring behind her. "Regret doesn't erase damage." "No," he said. "But it means I finally understand what I cost myself." Her gaze snapped back to his. "You didn't lose yourself, Kellen. You lost me." He flinched. The words landed harder than she meant them to. For a moment, neither spoke. When their food arrived, neither touched it. He was watching her. She was pretending not to notice. Finally, he said, "I've thought about this dinner for years." "Why?" "Because every time I closed a deal or hit another milestone, it meant less. You were the one thing I couldn't quantify." She smiled bitterly. "You always did like numbers better than people." "That was my mistake," he said quietly. "Numbers don't forgive you. They just move on." She sighed, leaning back. "You built your empire. You survived without me. Congratulations." He shook his head. "I built walls, not a life." That stopped her. She stared at him, trying to find the man she once knew behind the one sitting in front of her. "I didn't expect you to say that," she admitted. "I didn't expect to mean it," he replied. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of the ocean up to the terrace. For the first time, his composure cracked. "I never meant what you heard," he said again, voice low. "That night, I was trying to protect you. You were on the verge of a promotion. The board wanted you out. They said you were a distraction. So I said what I had to say to keep you safe." "You could have told me," she whispered. "I thought you'd hate me less if I said nothing." "You were wrong." "I know." The honesty in his tone disarmed her more than excuses ever could. He looked down, fingers brushing the rim of his glass. "After you left, I didn't sleep. I tried to find you, Baltimore, old contacts, even your university. You erased yourself completely." "That was the point," she said softly. "I needed to start over somewhere your shadow couldn't reach." He met her eyes. "And did it work?" "Mostly," she said. "Until today." He smiled faintly. "Then I ruined that too. Seems to be your specialty." He laughed quietly, sad, honest. "Maybe. But you're still here." She frowned. "Don't mistake tolerance for forgiveness." "I wouldn't dare." He paused. "But can I ask something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Did you ever stop thinking about me?" She stared at him, searching his face for the arrogance she expected. There wasn't any, just a man who looked tired of pretending. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Every day I tried to—" He exhaled slowly. "That's enough." The restaurant around them faded into background noise. The laughter, the music, the ocean. It all disappeared beneath the heavy silence of two people sitting at the edge of what they once were. Talia finally said, "What do you want, Kellen?" "Not your forgiveness," he said. "Your trust." Eventually, she shook her head. "You don't earn trust with apologies." "I know," he said. "You earn it with time. Time's the one thing you've already wasted." He nodded slowly, accepting the hit. "Then I'll start over." "How?" she challenged. By showing you who I've become when I'm not busy proving something. Her brow furrowed. You expect me to believe people change? He smiled softly. You did. That made her pause. He wasn't wrong. She wasn't the same woman who once fell for him. She was sharper now, more guarded, less easily swayed by charm, or at least she liked to think so. He reached across the table then, not to touch her hand, but to close the distance his words couldn't. I don't expect you to say yes to anything, he said. I just want you to let me show up differently. Talia looked down at his hand, then back at his face. Something in his eyes had shifted. The pride she once hated was gone. Show up differently? She repeated. He nodded. No promises, no grand gestures, just truth. She sat still, heartbeat steady, but her walls trembling. You can't erase what happened, she said quietly. I don't want to erase it, he replied. I want to earn the right to be part of your life after it. Her throat tightened. That's not something you earn, Kellen, she whispered. That's something you risk. He smiled faintly. Then let me risk it. The waiter arrived with a check, breaking the tension. Kellen paid without a word. When they stood, the air between them felt different, less sharp, more uncertain. Outside, the night was cool. The city lights reflected against the ocean like shattered stars. He turned to her. Thank you for coming. She nodded. Don't thank me yet. I wasn't planning to, he said softly. She smiled, the smallest curve of her lips. Still stubborn, still beautiful, he said. She rolled her eyes, stepping toward her car. Good night, Kellen. Good night, Talia. She drove away without looking back. But when she reached home, she didn't go inside. She sat in the car for a long time, staring at the message he'd sent earlier. No suits, no business. She laughed under her breath. You followed the rules this time. Then, for the first time in 5 years, she let herself remember, not the betrayal but the beginning. The laughter, the long nights, the way he used to listen like every word mattered. And that's when it hit her. She wasn't angry anymore, not like before. Just tired of pretending she didn't still feel something. The night should have ended at goodbye, but it didn't. Talia barely made it 3 blocks before the first raindrop hit her windshield, then another, and within seconds, the sky opened up over San Diego. She pulled into the nearest parking lot, watching the rain hammer down on the glass. It was the kind of storm that made the city slow down, made people run for cover. She sat there, headlights dimmed, heart louder than the rain. Her phone buzzed. Kellen, still in the car? She blinked. How did he? She glanced out the window and froze. Across the street, under a street lamp, he was standing in the rain. No umbrella, no coat, just him. He didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, letting the rain soak through his shirt, eyes fixed on her car. Her breath caught. Every part of her wanted to drive away. Instead, she opened the door. The rain hit her like cold glass, soaking through her clothes instantly. She crossed the street, stopping a few feet from him. You're insane, she said. Maybe, he replied, rain dripping from his hair. But you weren't going to answer my text. You're right, she said. I wasn't. He smiled faintly. Then I'm glad I didn't wait for your reply. She shook her head. You're standing in the rain in dress shoes, Kellen. I've stood in worse places. She sighed, pushing a strand of wet hair from her face. What do you want? 5 minutes, he said, without the table, without the titles. Her jaw clenched. You had your 5 minutes. I wasted them on apologies, he said. Now, I just want to talk. She stared at him, rainwater tracing her cheekbones. You really think words can fix this? He shook his head. No. But silence already broke us once. Something about that hit her harder than she expected. They found shelter beneath the awning of a closed cafe. The world around them was quiet, muted by rain. He took a breath. You said I didn't know how to love without control. Because you didn't. He nodded slowly. You were right. I didn't know what love looked like when it wasn't earned through results. I measured everything, Success, loyalty, value, even people. And where did that get you? She asked softly. He looked at her. Alone. The honesty in his voice disarmed her. After you left, he continued, I started asking myself why I treated you like a project instead of a person. It took me years to admit that it wasn't arrogance. It was fear. Fear of what? He hesitated, needing someone who didn't need me back. Her throat tightened. That's not love, Kellen. That's control disguised as protection. I know, he said quietly, and I hate the man who didn't know the difference. For a moment, the only sound was the rain. Then he said, when I heard you started Monroe Branding, I followed your work, every campaign, every launch. I was proud of you. She blinked. You followed my work? He smiled faintly. I even recommended one of your projects to a VC firm 2 years ago. I didn't think they'd pick you up. Guess they did. Her eyes widened. You were behind that. I didn't want credit, he said. I just wanted to make sure you got the chance you deserved. Her heart twisted. You think doing me a professional favor balances what you did personally? No, he said, but it reminded me of who you were before I broke you. And I missed her. Her voice softened. She's not gone. She just stopped believing you. He nodded. Then maybe I can spend the rest of my life earning her belief back. The way he said it wasn't grand. It was quiet, real, and that scared her more than all his arrogance ever did. She turned away, looking at the rain falling off the edge of the awning. I spent years rebuilding myself from the silence you left behind, she said. I learned to sleep without wondering why I wasn't enough. I found peace, and now you're here, digging up graves I buried for a reason. He stepped closer, careful not to touch her. I'm not here to take your peace, Talia. I'm here to deserve a place in it. Her breath trembled. You always did know what to say. He shook his head. Not before, but I mean it now. Why now? He met her eyes. Because this time, I know losing you isn't punishment. It's a consequence. She didn't speak. Her silence said everything. A sudden gust of wind sent rain spraying across them. Talia laughed softly, brushing water from her face. You really should have picked a drier place to prove a point. He smiled. I didn't expect you to meet me halfway. Don't flatter yourself, she said. I just hate wasted effort. He chuckled quietly. You haven't changed. She looked up at him. Neither have you. You're still stubborn, only about things that matter. And I matter? She asked. He didn't hesitate. You always did. The words were simple. No theatrics, no manipulation, and for the first time she believed he might actually mean them. They stood there in silence, two people who had finally run out of excuses and found themselves back where it all began, between rain, truth, and choices. When the downpour eased, he looked at her and said, Let me drive you home. She hesitated. You don't even know where I live. I found you once, he said quietly. I can find you again. She sighed. You never learned when to quit. That's because I quit too easily once, he said. Her lips curved slightly. You're persistent. I'll give you that. I'll take persistent over perfect, he replied. She turned toward her car. Don't follow me, Kellen. He nodded. I won't, but I'll wait. Wait for what? For you to stop running. Her pulse jumped. You think I'm running? He smiled softly. No. I think you're remembering. She drove off, headlights cutting through the wet streets, but his words stayed with her. She wanted to shake them off, to call him delusional, but he wasn't wrong. She was remembering. Not the betrayal, not the pain, the moments before everything broke, the laughter, the calm, the feeling of being seen. When she reached her apartment, she sat in silence for a long time before finally going inside. Her clothes were soaked. Her heart was worse. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights through streaks of rain. He was still somewhere out there, and for the first time since New York, she didn't feel anger when she thought of him. She felt something far more dangerous. Hope. The days that followed the rain felt lighter, quieter, almost deceptive. Talia convinced herself it was over, that the dinner, the confrontation, the conversation in the storm had been closure, not reopening. But closure doesn't text you at 8:03 a.m. on a Monday morning. Kellen, you left your umbrella on the chair. Talia, consider it a tip for your persistence. Kellen, then I'll keep it close. She didn't reply after that. But she smiled, just once, and hated herself for it. At Monroe Branding, work went on as usual. Her team was preparing final drafts for a health tech campaign. Meetings ran long. Coffee cups stacked up. Yet even in the middle of all the noise, she caught herself checking her phone too often. Naomi noticed. You're distracted, she said, dropping a file on Talia's desk. I'm focused, Talia replied. Focused people don't read their emails twice, Naomi teased, and they definitely don't smile at them. Talia blinked. I'm not smiling, Naomi grinned. You are now. Talia rolled her eyes, but the blush on her face betrayed her. Naomi, finish the client report. Yes, boss, Naomi said, walking out. But if this is about a man, blink twice. Talia ignored her and turned back to her screen. But she was blinking. That evening, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, a courier stood there holding a white box. Talia Monroe? Yes. Delivery for you. He handed her the box and left. Inside was a small black umbrella with a note taped to the handle. You forgot this once. I figured I'd give it back before the next storm. Kay, her chest tightened. She wanted to be angry at the gesture, but instead she laughed. Of course he did. Later that week, she attended a business mixer hosted by a local venture group. She hadn't planned on running into him there, but life loved repetition. Kellen was across the room, speaking with two investors. He looked different in this light, less corporate, more human. When his eyes found hers, he stopped mid-sentence. She froze, then turned to the bar. He followed. You keep showing up where I am, she said, sipping her drink. He smiled slightly. Or maybe you keep showing up where I am. Statistically unlikely, she said dryly. Then maybe it's not about statistics anymore. She glanced at him. You always did like to rewrite definitions. Only the wrong ones, he said. Their eyes lingered longer than they should have. They ended up on the balcony after the event, away from the noise and small talk. San Diego's skyline stretched before them, warm lights glittering against the cool night. I didn't expect to see you again so soon, she said. I didn't plan it, he admitted. But I'm not sorry. She crossed her arms. You're not making this easy. I'm not trying to. Then, what are you doing? He hesitated. Learning how to be patient. She tilted her head. With me? With timing, he said quietly. With people. With everything I used to rush. She looked away, trying to hide the flicker of emotion. His tone stirred. He stepped closer, voice softer. You don't owe me anything, Talia. Not time, not forgiveness. But if we ever cross paths again, I'd like to leave you with better memories than the last ones I gave you. Her throat tightened. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said. But some things are worth the work. For a while, neither spoke. They stood side by side, both staring out at the city, as if looking for answers in the skyline. Finally, she asked, What if this is a mistake? He looked at her. Then I'll take responsibility for it. And if it's not, then I'll take responsibility for that too. The confidence in his voice was different now, not the kind that demanded, but the kind that reassured. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was maturity. That difference unsettled her more than the old version of him ever did. A few days later, he appeared at her office again, but this time he didn't come to see her. He dropped off documents for a joint brand collaboration Dorsey Tech was offering her firm. No notes, no flowers, just clean business. Naomi nearly squealed when she saw his signature on the paperwork. Wait, the Kellen Dorsey, the billionaire. Keep your voice down, Talia muttered. He's working with us? Talia hesitated. Apparently, Naomi smirked. And you didn't tell me this was the man texting you about umbrellas? Talia shot her a look. We're not talking about that. Okay, Naomi said, grinning. But if he sends another umbrella, I'm framing it. That weekend, Talia attended a private pitch event at a local startup accelerator. Halfway through the night, the lights dimmed for a guest speaker. And there he was, again. She whispered under her breath, "You've got to be kidding me." After his talk, he caught her waiting near the back. "Don't look at me like that," he said. "I was invited. I'm sure you were." He laughed. "This is becoming a pattern, or a warning. Maybe both." After the event, they found themselves walking toward the parking lot together. The air was cool, the city alive with quiet movement. He looked at her and said, "You know, every time I run into you, you look calmer." "Or colder," she countered. "Calm," he repeated. "The kind that doesn't break anymore." She stopped walking. "You sound like you're analyzing me again." "Maybe I am," he said softly. "Except this time, I'm not looking for weaknesses." "Then what are you looking for?" "Permission," he said. Her heart jumped. "For what?" "To try again." Slowly, the words hung between them, delicate but heavy. She exhaled. "You don't get to plan that." "I'm not planning," he said. "I'm hoping." For the first time in a long time, Talia didn't have a quick response. Because she realized he wasn't chasing her anymore. He was waiting. And somehow that made him harder to ignore. That night, she sat on her couch, staring at her phone. Another message. "Kellen, I don't expect answers. I'm just glad I got to see you smile again." She stared at it for a long time before typing back. "Talia, don't get used to it." "Kellen, too late." She dropped the phone beside her and smiled. A real one this time. The next week at Monroe Branding started with a surprise. When Talia walked in, the front desk was covered in neatly arranged packages. She frowned. "What's all this?" Naomi beamed. "Client appreciation gifts. Dorsey Tech sent them this morning." Talia froze. "They what?" Naomi pointed at the silver ribboned boxes. "Each one labeled with our names. There's even one for the intern." Talia sighed, opening hers carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. "For the team that gave our brand a heart again. Kellen." She folded the note back into the box, her pulse steady, but her thoughts racing. This wasn't a grand gesture. It was quiet, respectful. He hadn't singled her out. He had acknowledged her team. It was the first time he'd done something that wasn't about him and her, but about what she'd built. And that mattered. Later that afternoon, she got a call. "Monroe Branding," she said, professional tone engaged. "It's me," came his voice. She sighed. "Kellen, this is a business line." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm calling." "What do you want?" "I wanted to thank your team personally," he said. "The new brand concepts are perfect. You should be proud." She hesitated. "I am. You should be," he repeated softly. "I read through every proposal. I could hear your voice in the work. That's because I wrote most of it." "I know," he said, "and it reminded me why I trusted you with my company once, and why I shouldn't have risked losing you as a person." Talia exhaled quietly. "You're mixing business and personal again." He chuckled. "Maybe they were never that separate for me. Then maybe that's why we failed," she said. "Maybe," he agreed. "But it doesn't mean we can't learn from it." Before she could respond, he added, "Lunch. On neutral ground. I'll have my assistant book something casual." She smiled faintly. "You think I need an assistant to tell me no? I think you'll say yes eventually." And he hung up. She stared at her phone. He was infuriating. And patient, a dangerous combination. 2 days later, Naomi entered her office holding 2 cups of coffee. "Guess who I ran into at Ground and Grain?" Talia groaned. "Don't say it." Naomi grinned. "Mr. Dorsey. He paid for my drink." "He what?" "And told the barista to add your order to his tab indefinitely." Talia buried her face in her hands. "He didn't." "Oh, he did," Naomi said. "That man's got range, apology gifts, brand recognition, caffeine strategy. He's unstoppable." Talia laughed, despite herself. You're enjoying this too much. Because it's nice seeing someone chase you for once, Naomi said. You always chase goals. Maybe let someone chase your heart. Talia looked away. It's not that simple. Maybe it's supposed to be, Naomi said gently. Maybe love isn't meant to be a battlefield every time. Talia didn't respond, but the words stayed. That evening, she found herself outside Ground and Grain, the coffee shop Kellen had picked. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself she just wanted her usual latte. Then she saw him, sitting by the window, typing on his laptop, sleeves rolled, expression focused. He looked up the second she entered. Their eyes met. He smiled. She sighed. You have a way of making coincidence look suspicious. I could say the same, he replied. You found my favorite coffee shop. It was mine first. Then we've been sharing for years without knowing it. She smiled slightly. You're impossible. He gestured to the chair across from him. Stay for 5 minutes, no pressure. Just coffee. She hesitated, then sat down. 5 minutes turned into 40. They didn't talk about the past that day. They talked about music, movies, design, cities they missed, and how neither of them could cook. She noticed things she'd forgotten. The way he listened without interrupting. The way his voice softened when he spoke about art or childhood memories. He wasn't the same man who once measured love in results. He seemed real. When she stood to leave, he said, "This was nice." It was. I'd like to do it again. She smiled faintly. You're getting greedy. Only for the things that feel right, he said. Her heart skipped, but she hid it well. We'll see. He didn't push. He just nodded. We'll see. Over the next few weeks he started showing up, not uninvited, but meaningfully. At networking events, always keeping distance. At charity mixers, never taking credit when she mentioned him. Sometimes a short message after long days. Kellen, you look tired today. Take care of yourself. Kellen, don't forget the art gallery opens tomorrow. You'd love it. Kellen, no expectations, just reminders. He never flirted. He never demanded attention. He just existed, calmly, steadily, like he'd finally learned that love isn't performance. And somehow, that consistency began to soften her edges. One Saturday morning, she found herself walking along the coast. The air was warm, the waves gentle. Her phone buzzed. Kellen, if you're at Wincliffe Beach, turn around. She did. He was there, hands in his pockets, smile easy. She shook her head. You're persistent. I told you I'd wait. For what? For you to stop expecting me to disappear. Her lips parted, but no words came. They walked together along the sand in silence. For once, no tension, no pretense. When they reached the pier, she turned to him. You've changed, she said softly. He nodded. I had to. Why? Because the man I was didn't deserve the woman I lost. The words lingered, carried by the ocean breeze. She looked at him for a long time, then finally said, maybe we both needed to lose each other to learn who we were. He smiled faintly. Maybe now we can meet for real. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't correct him. She didn't walk away. She just smiled, small, quiet and honest. Spring settled softly over San Diego. The days stretched longer, the air warmer, the city slower. For the first time in years, Talia felt the stillness without fear. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space. And somehow, Kellen had become part of that space, not by force, not by apology, by showing up. It started small. He began dropping by Monroe Branding once a week, not for her, but for business consultations. He came prepared, polite, professional, and every time he left her office without lingering. It confused her. This version of Kellen didn't chase, didn't demand. He respected her silence, and that made her trust him more than his words ever could. One afternoon, Naomi leaned against her doorway. He's here again. Talia didn't look up from her laptop. So, Naomi said, he didn't even ask for you today, just left files for review. Talia smirked. Good. That's how business works. Naomi folded her arms. You sound disappointed. I'm not. You are. Talia sighed, closing her laptop. Why are you always right? Naomi grinned. Because you only get flustered when you care. Later that night, Talia sat on her balcony, city lights flickering below. Her phone buzzed. Kellen. The board approved the new campaign. They were impressed with your firm's work. Talia. I'm glad it helped your launch. Kellen. It wasn't just help. It was transformation. You gave Dorsey Tech a soul again. She smiled faintly, then paused. Talia, don't make this personal. Kellen, it's not. It's gratitude. Talia, there's a difference between gratitude and sentiment. Kellen, I know. That's why I'm careful now. Her chest tightened. He wasn't playing games. He was being careful with her. That weekend, he texted again. Kellen, are you free tomorrow? There's an art fair downtown. Talia, you're assuming I like art fairs. Kellen, you used to. You told me once art was the only thing that made chaos feel intentional. She blinked. He remembered. After a long pause, she replied, Talia, send the address. The next afternoon, they met under the white tents of the downtown Pier Fair. The place buzzed with color and sound. Street musicians, local painters, food stalls filling the air with spice and laughter. Kellen wore jeans and a white shirt. No suit, no shield. Just him. You look different, she said. He smiled. So do you. She rolled her eyes. Don't flirt. I wasn't. Observation, not strategy. Good, she said, hiding her smile. Let's walk. They strolled past art booths and handmade jewelry displays. He bought her a lavender lemonade from a stand. When she tried to pay, he shook his head. Let me have this one small victory. She sipped it, pretending not to enjoy it. You're still impossible. He grinned. I'm improving. They stopped in front of a large canvas, an abstract swirl of blue and gold. Talia stared at it. It feels unfinished. Kellen tilted his head. Or maybe it's meant to be that way. She glanced at him. You think everything incomplete has beauty? He looked back at her. I think the best things usually are. The air between them grew still. A few people passed by, laughing, pointing at other paintings. But Talia barely noticed. For a moment, it felt like time folded back on itself, before the betrayal, before the words that broke them. Just them, quiet, understanding. She finally said, You always had a way of saying something that sounds like wisdom and trouble at the same time. He smiled. Maybe I'm both. Don't flatter yourself, she said, though her voice softened. They spent the afternoon wandering through stalls. He didn't touch her, didn't overstep. When she mentioned a small local artist she admired, he bought one of their prints, but not for her. He handed it to a young girl sketching nearby. For your collection, he said kindly. Talia watched, surprised. You didn't used to do things like that. He shrugged. Maybe I was too focused on building to notice the world around me. And now I want to see it. The way you always did. She looked at him quietly. You sound like you're trying to be someone new. He shook his head. No. I'm trying to become who I should have been when you first met me. That stopped her. She didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. By sunset, the fair lights flickered on. He walked her to her car. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making this complicated. He smiled faintly. That's new for me. She opened the car door, then paused. You know, part of me expected this to feel forced. And does it? No, she admitted. It feels calm. He nodded slowly. That's all I want. No pressure, no promises, just peace. She looked at him. You mean that? I've spent years trying to control outcomes, he said quietly. Now, I'm just learning to show up. She exhaled, her expression softening. You're doing better than you think. His eyes met hers. That means more than you know. She smiled gently. Good night, Kellen. Good night, Talia. When she drove home, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. There was something new in her eyes. Not the girl who loved blindly. Not the woman who ran from heartbreak. Someone in between, stronger, wiser, and maybe ready to believe again. She parked, leaned against her car, and looked up at the darkening sky. A notification blinked on her phone. Kellen, today was good. Thank you for letting me be in your day. She typed slowly. Talia, you were easy to be around. He replied a minute later. Kellen, I'll try to keep it that way. Her smile deepened as she whispered to herself, maybe you finally will. Talia's phone buzzed non-stop with messages. Clients wanted reassurance, partners wanted statements, and deep down, a part of her wanted to call him, not out of curiosity, but worry. By noon, she was pacing her office. Naomi appeared at the door, holding her phone. He's on TV right now. Press conference. Talia looked up at the screen. Kellen stood before the cameras, composed but tense. I take full responsibility, he said evenly. The issue occurred under my leadership. We're cooperating fully with investigators and focusing on protecting our clients' trust. Reporters shouted questions, flashing lights blinding him. He didn't flinch, didn't deflect. He owned it. Talia's chest tightened. The old Kellen would have blamed someone. This one didn't. When the feed cut off, Naomi exhaled. He handled that better than most would. Talia nodded slowly. Yeah. He did. That evening, as she locked up the office, her phone buzzed again. Kellen, I know you've seen the news. Don't believe every headline. We're okay. Talia, you don't owe me updates. Kellen, maybe not. But I wanted you to know before you heard anything worse. She hesitated, then replied, Talia, are you okay? Kellen, tired, but standing. Talia, that's something. Kellen, it's everything when you're used to falling alone. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't reply. She didn't need to. He was trying. The next morning, she arrived at work to find him waiting outside her building. He looked different. No suit, no entourage, just exhaustion hiding behind quiet strength. Morning, he said. You shouldn't be here, she said gently. I didn't come to cause trouble, he replied. I came to thank you. For what? For not disappearing this time. She folded her arms. Who said I wasn't going to? He smiled faintly. If you were, you wouldn't have texted. She sighed. You're still too observant. Occupational hazard, he said. Reading people's patterns. She studied him for a moment. So what now? You going to fix this with charm? He shook his head. With honesty, they walked to a nearby cafe, away from the cameras and whispers. He ordered black coffee. She got tea. When they sat, he said quietly, It's bad, but it's manageable. Someone from the old division sold client data. The board wants answers. And accountability. Meaning you, she said. He nodded. Always stops at the top. And you're ready for that? He looked up. I wasn't before. But this time, I'm not running. She watched him, searching for signs of the man who once hid behind control. But he looked different. Tired, but transparent. That's growth, she said softly. He smiled. You sound surprised. I am. He leaned back. Then I'm doing something right. The silence between them was warm, not heavy. He took a sip of coffee, then said, Funny thing is, when this happened, the first person I thought about wasn't a lawyer or investor. Who then? You, he said simply. Her pulse jumped. Why? Because you've faced worse. You know how to rebuild from nothing. I've read your story in interviews. You took your pain and turned it into something real. She blinked. You read my interviews. He smiled faintly. Every one of them. I like the part where you said you stopped measuring worth by who stayed and started measuring it by what you built. Her chest tightened. You remember that? Word for word. She didn't know whether to be angry or moved. So she said nothing. After a pause, she whispered, You're different, Kellen. I had to be, he said. You can't lose everything twice and stay the same. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean twice? The first time was you, he said quietly. The second was the company. Both were my fault. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not the same man I left in New York. He smiled slightly. That's the goal. She sipped her tea slowly. So what happens now? He exhaled. I'll fix what I can. If I lose the company, I'll start again. But this time, I won't build it alone. Her eyes lifted. Are you asking me to help? He shook his head. I'm asking you to believe that I finally understand partnership. That line hit her harder than any confession could have. The cafe grew quiet. Outside, traffic hummed softly. For the first time since their past collided again, she felt something new. Respect, not for who he was, but who he'd become. She said, You're not asking for forgiveness anymore. He shook his head. No, I'm asking for understanding. Those aren't the same. I know, he said. Forgiveness expects closure. Understanding allows growth. She leaned back. You sound like therapy. He smiled. I took some. Her eyebrows lifted. Seriously? He nodded. After you left, I had to face the kind of man I was becoming. Someone who equated control with safety. I didn't like him. And now, I'm learning to listen instead of dictate. To give space instead of take it. She stared at him, quietly stunned. You're serious, she said. Dead serious. They left the cafe together. Outside, the sky was clear again. He turned to her. Talia, I'm not asking you to forget, but if I have one request, don't let the memory of who I was blind you to who I'm trying to be. She held his gaze. And what if I'm afraid? Then I'll move slow enough for both of us. Something about the way he said it, steady, unshaken, broke through the last wall she had left. That night, she replayed the day in her mind. The man who once dismissed her emotions now took responsibility for his failures. The man who once built walls was now walking through them. And for the first time, she believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't need to. Her phone buzzed once before bed. Kellen, thank you for listening today. Talia, you earned it. Kellen, I'll keep earning it. She smiled softly. For the first time, she didn't reply. She didn't have to. Because for the first time in years, peace didn't feel foreign. It felt deserved. Sometimes, the true test of love isn't what breaks you apart. It's who shows up when life breaks them. Would you believe someone's change if it showed up when everything around them fell apart? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The week after the press storm, things began to settle. Dorsey Tech stabilized, the board calmed, and the noise faded back into whispers. But between those quiet spaces, something else had shifted. Something that couldn't be managed by headlines or PR. Talia had stopped fighting the thought of him. She wasn't ready to admit she missed him, but she no longer denied that she cared. Friday evening, she was closing her laptop when her phone buzzed. Kellen, I'm at the Marina Pier. No meetings, no reporters. Just peace. Join me for 5 minutes. She read it twice, then again. The old her would have said no. The woman she was now didn't owe anyone avoidance. 10 minutes later, she was walking toward the pier. The air was cool and quiet. The sky painted with soft streaks of orange and violet. He was there, hands in his pockets, looking out over the water like he'd been waiting a long time. When he turned and saw her, something in his eyes eased. You came, he said simply. You said peace, she replied. I needed some too. He smiled faintly. Then let's keep the noise away. They walked side by side down the wooden boardwalk, the ocean murmuring beneath their feet. Neither spoke for several minutes. It was the kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. Finally, Talia said quietly, You handled the crisis well. I had help, he said. A better team than I deserve. And you listened to them this time? She teased. He smiled. Every word. That's new. It's progress, he said. Slow but real. She nodded, looking out over the waves. You know, when I left New York, I told myself, if I ever saw you again, I'd never believe a thing you said. And now, I don't have to believe you, she said softly. I can see it. His chest rose with a slow breath. That means more than you know. They stopped near the edge of the pier. The breeze lifted her hair, brushing it across her face. He reached out instinctively, then stopped halfway. Can I? He asked. She nodded. He gently tucked the loose strand behind her ear, fingers lingering for a heartbeat too long. Talia didn't pull away. Something in the simplicity of the gesture, the caution, the respect, made her eyes sting. She whispered, You used to touch me like I belonged to you. He looked at her. And now? Now you touch me like you're afraid to lose the right again. He swallowed. That's exactly what I am. They stood there, motionless, as the wind brushed past. Her voice broke the silence. You said once that control made you feel safe. Does this, she gestured between them, still feel dangerous to you? He shook his head slowly. No, it feels honest. Finally, she studied him. And if I told you I'm still scared, I'd say thank you, he said. For what? For trusting me with your fear. Her breath caught. She wasn't used to that. Someone who didn't try to fix her fear, but honored it. They sat on a nearby bench, watching the lights shimmer across the water. He said quietly, You ever think about how much of life is timing? She smiled faintly. All the time. 5 years ago, I thought love was a weakness, he said. Something that distracted you from purpose. And now I know it's the only thing that makes purpose mean something. She laughed softly. You sound like a completely different man. I had to lose everything to meet him, he said. She looked at him, voice quieter. And do you like him? He smiled. Not always. But he's learning. A seagull called in the distance. The water glimmered. He turned slightly toward her. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why didn't you ever come back to New York? You could have built anything there. She hesitated. Because that city knew too much of my pain. Every street corner reminded me of what I lost. Leaving wasn't running. It was healing. He nodded. I understand that now. Do you? She asked. He met her gaze. Yeah. I left pieces of myself there too. The man who thought success meant silence. The man who loved you wrong. Her throat tightened. You really think people can change that much? He smiled softly. I don't think. I live it. Silence stretched again, tender and full. Finally, Talia said, You know what scares me the most? He waited. That we're doing this again. That I'll start believing you, and then, he finished for her. You'll lose me again. She nodded. He exhaled. Then let me promise you something different this time. Kellen, no grand gestures, he said. No vows. Just this. If I ever make you question your worth again, I'll walk away before you have to. Her eyes glistened. You're not supposed to make me cry at the pier. He smiled faintly. Then stop being so honest with your heart. They stayed until the sun fully set. When she finally stood, he did too. As they walked back toward the parking lot, he said quietly, You know, I used to think strength meant being the loudest in the room. And now? She asked. He glanced at her. Now I think it means being quiet enough to hear the person next to you breathe. She laughed softly. You're poetic tonight. I'm peaceful tonight, he said simply. They reached her car. He waited while she unlocked the door. Before she got in, he said, Thank you for showing up. I almost didn't, she admitted. I know, he said. But you did. And that's enough. She smiled. You're learning. I have a good teacher. When she drove away, he stayed there a while, hands in his pockets, watching the taillights fade into the night. He didn't chase, didn't text, didn't call. He just stood there, letting the peace between them do what words never could. And for the first time in both their lives, love didn't feel like a war. It felt like a truce. It was past 10 p.m. when Talia's phone buzzed. She'd been sketching new ideas for a client rebrand, half distracted, half at peace. The message read, Kellen, I know it's late, but I need to tell you something before it gets harder to say. She frowned, setting her pen down. Talia, is it business-related? Kellen, no. Personal. Talia, then it can wait until morning. Kellen, it already waited 5 years. Her chest tightened. She hesitated, then typed back, Talia, where are you? Kellen, Pier 9, the spot where we watched the sunset. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then grabbed her keys. The pier was nearly empty when she arrived. The ocean was restless tonight, waves crashing harder, wind sharper. Kellen stood at the edge, his reflection flickering across the water's dark surface. When she approached, he didn't turn. I didn't think you'd come, he said quietly. I almost didn't, she replied. He exhaled. Then I'm glad you did. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the wind filled the silence between them. Finally, Talia crossed her arms. You said you had something to tell me. He nodded. The night you left New York, I lied about one more thing. Her pulse jumped. What do you mean? He turned slowly to face her. His expression was calm, but his eyes, those sharp, controlled eyes, were heavy with something she couldn't name. I didn't just lose you that week, he said. I lost my father. Talia froze. Your father? He had a stroke, Kellen said softly. I got the call the night before that meeting, the one you overheard. Her lips parted, stunned. You never mentioned it. I didn't tell anyone, he said. Not the board, not the team, not even you. I thought I could compartmentalize everything. My grief, my guilt, my fear of losing control. She took a step closer. So when you said those words about me, he nodded. I was unraveling, angry, exhausted. I said what I needed to say to stop someone from questioning you because I couldn't deal with losing one more thing that week. Her voice wavered. You let me walk away thinking you used me. I did, he admitted, because part of me thought maybe I deserved to lose you. The wind pulled at her hair. She stared at him, every emotion fighting to surface, anger, shock, sadness, pity. You could have told me, she whispered. I wanted to, he said, but you were already gone. And after that, I didn't know how to reach someone who'd already closed the door. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. You don't get to decide how I process pain, Kellen. You broke me, and then you hid behind silence. He stepped closer, voice low. I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me for it. I'm asking you to understand why I was the man I was back then. Her eyes lifted to his. And what about now? He looked at her with quiet sincerity. Now I'm the man who'd rather lose everything than lose your trust again. Her throat tightened. You don't have to keep proving you've changed. He shook his head. It's not about proving anymore. It's about telling the truth, even when it hurts. They stood inches apart, both silent, both trembling under the weight of what finally surfaced. Talia looked down at the water. You carried that alone all this time. He nodded. I thought it was strength, but it was fear. I kept everything locked inside because I didn't know how to be seen and still feel safe. Her voice softened. And now you do. He smiled faintly. I do when I'm with you. That line broke something inside her. Not in the painful way, but in the kind that lets air back into places you thought were gone. She turned away, brushing tears from her face. You should have told me sooner. I know. It would have changed everything. Maybe, he said quietly. Or maybe we needed to break first. She looked back at him. You really believe that? He nodded. Pain changes the way you love. I had to lose everything soft in me before I learned how to handle something fragile. She swallowed. You mean me? I mean us. A long silence settled between them again, full of things neither could say. Then she whispered, I don't know if I can forget what you said back then. He stepped closer. Don't forget it, remember it, and see who I've become in spite of it. Her eyes filled again. You make it sound so simple. It's not, he said. It's terrifying, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. When she opened them again, he was still there, still waiting. I don't know what this is anymore, she whispered. Forgiveness, closure, or the beginning of something that could break us again. He nodded. Then let's not label it. Let's just keep showing up. Her lips trembled into the smallest, most exhausted smile. You're impossible. Persistent, he corrected. She laughed softly. There it is. The wind died down, and the pier lights reflected against the water like tiny fires. He looked at her and said quietly, "Can I hold you? Just once. No promises, no expectations." She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her carefully, like she might disappear if he wasn't gentle enough. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was still, honest, safe. She exhaled against his chest, letting years of tension melt into that single breath. His voice was quiet against her hair. "I'm sorry for every night you cried alone because of me," she whispered back. "I'm sorry for every time I stopped believing love could heal." They stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing, needing nothing. And for the first time, the past didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a story that finally had an ending neither of them had to run from. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes met his. Soft, uncertain, hopeful. She said, "So, what happens now?" He smiled. "We rebuild, slowly, with both hands open." She nodded, her heart trembling. "Then don't let go." He didn't. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the pier. No promises, no declarations, just peace. It was strange at first. Talia wasn't used to calm. She had built her life on control, on keeping every emotion locked behind polished professionalism. But Kellen didn't demand entry. He waited at the door. And that waiting changed everything. Their connection grew through ordinary things. Coffee runs, project check-ins, late-night emails that drifted into soft conversation. There were no more grand gestures, only presence. He texted her once, "Don't overwork tonight. Rest is progress too." She replied, "You sound like me." He sent back, "Maybe you taught me something." That was their rhythm now. Honest, quiet, steady. One Thursday morning, he invited her to Dorsey Tech's new design floor. "Come see what your influence created," he'd said. She almost declined, but curiosity had always been her weakness. When she arrived, the space surprised her. Gone were the cold grey walls, the harsh fluorescent lights. In their place, warm tones, art, and collaborative spaces that looked like they were made for people, not machines. "You redesigned all this?" she asked. He smiled. "With help." "From a few lessons I learned." Which were, "That productivity doesn't come from pressure," he said. "It comes from peace." She glanced around again. "You finally believe that?" He nodded. "I do now." Her gaze softened. "It's beautiful, Kellen." He smiled quietly. "So are second chances." She met his eyes but didn't answer. Some things didn't need words. They walked past teams laughing over coffee, interns brainstorming in open spaces, and quiet workstations bathed in natural light. This wasn't the Dorsey Tech she remembered. "You changed the culture," she said. "I changed the leadership," he corrected. "Starting with mine." "You sound proud." "Not proud," he said. "Grateful." "Why?" "Because I finally learned that leading people isn't about control. It's about care." She nodded slowly. "It suits you." He smiled faintly. "You suit peace better too." Her cheeks warmed. "You really should stop saying things like that." He laughed quietly. "Probably. But you like it when I don't hold back." She gave him a small, knowing look. "Maybe." Later that afternoon, they shared lunch in his office, simple takeout boxes, no pretense. He sat across from her, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. The CEO mask was gone. "You ever miss New York?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said. "The energy, the speed, but not who I was there." "And who was that?" "The version of me that loved people who didn't love themselves yet," she said softly. He looked down. "Ouch." She smiled faintly. "You asked." "I did. And you're right." "About what?" That I didn't love myself then, he said. I only loved being needed. Her expression softened. That's not love, Kellen. That's survival. He nodded. I know. I'm done surviving. She tilted her head. So what are you doing now? Learning how to live, he said. And if I'm lucky, learning how to love right. Her pulse jumped. She looked down quickly, pretending to open her lunchbox. He didn't press. He just let the silence breathe between them. That weekend, he invited her to join him at a local community event. Dorsey Tech's sponsoring a mentorship program for underprivileged students, he said. You'd love it. It's about design and storytelling. She hesitated, then agreed. When she arrived, she found him kneeling beside a table of teenagers, helping them sketch out ideas for app logos. He wasn't commanding the room. He was listening, patient, warm, present. A girl laughed, saying, "You draw worse than I do." He grinned. "That's the point. You're supposed to outgrow me." Talia stood in the corner watching, her heart catching on something she hadn't expected: admiration. This wasn't the man who once weaponized silence. This was someone who used it to make room for others. When he noticed her watching, he smiled and waved her over. "Everyone," he said, "this is Talia Monroe, the woman who built the brand that's helping fund this program." The kids clapped, some whispering her name. She flushed, laughing softly. "Okay, no pressure." Kellen grinned. "They need to see what rebuilding looks like." She gave him a side glance. "You mean you or me?" He smiled. "Both." After the event, they walked to their cars under the soft glow of streetlights. "You're good with them," she said. He shrugged. "They remind me who I was before the world taught me to be hard." She looked at him. "Maybe that's the version of you I fell for." He stopped walking. "Maybe that's the version I've been trying to find again." The air between them thickened. Warm, unspoken, real. He said quietly, "You don't have to say it back. But every day, I'm trying to earn the version of your trust that used to look at me like I could do no wrong." She smiled faintly. "You won't ever be perfect again." "I know," he said softly. "But I'm hoping to be forgiven anyway." Her eyes softened. "You already are." He blinked. "I am." She nodded. "Forgiven. Not forgotten, but forgiven." He exhaled slowly. "That's more grace than I deserve." "Maybe," she said, stepping closer. "But grace isn't about deserving. It's about learning." He looked at her, his voice quieter now. "Then teach me." She smiled. "You're learning just fine." They stood there a moment longer, the world around them fading into soft hums of passing cars and distant laughter. For the first time, neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. Because this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something worth staying for. The days that followed were simple: calls, coffee, calm. But something was shifting beneath all that normal. The distance between them wasn't made of fear anymore. It was patience, and longing disguised as peace. One evening, Talia stopped by his office to drop off some revised designs. "Your assistant said you were still here," she said, leaning into the doorway. Kellen looked up from his desk, tie loose, sleeves rolled. His expression softened. "Guess I lost track of time." She smiled faintly. "You always did." "Stay a minute," he asked. She hesitated. "I don't want to interrupt." "You never do," he said, pushing his chair back. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the city outside the tall glass windows. She set the folder down and sat across from him. "Here's the final proposal draft. I think you'll like it." "I already like anything you touch," he said without thinking. She looked up, caught off guard. He exhaled. "Sorry. That came out wrong." "No," she said softly. "It didn't." The tension that followed wasn't sharp. It was soft, magnetic. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the skyline. Do you ever wonder how two people can spend years apart, and when they meet again, it still feels unfinished? She folded her hands in her lap. Maybe because some stories weren't supposed to end where they did. He turned to her, his voice low. And maybe they ended so they could be written differently the second time. She held his gaze, steady and quiet. You talk like you've thought about this a lot. Every day, he said simply. Her breath caught. And what do you think now? He stepped closer. I think love doesn't always get one chance. Sometimes it waits until both people are ready to handle it. The silence that followed felt like gravity, pulling, certain. He stopped a few feet away. You don't have to say anything, he said gently. I just needed you to know. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. You always say what I'm not ready to hear. He smiled faintly. Then maybe I'm finally speaking your language. Her heart thudded. She rose slowly from her chair. The space between them vanished inch by inch until his breath mingled with hers. He didn't touch her, didn't dare, but his voice was quiet enough to reach the parts of her that still ached. Talia, he said, her name breaking softly on his lips. Tell me to stop. She didn't, because for once, she didn't want to. When his hand reached her cheek, she didn't flinch. The warmth of his touch was familiar, safe. You've changed, she whispered. He smiled. You helped me. Her fingers brushed the side of his wrist, tracing the pulse that matched hers. I don't know what this is anymore, she said. Then let's not name it, he murmured. Let's just be honest inside it. And then he kissed her. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't rushed. It was years of pain, forgiveness, and quiet remembering, pressed into one slow, trembling moment. She tasted truth, regret, hope. When he finally pulled back, he didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence said everything words couldn't. Later that night, they walked together to the parking lot. The air smelled faintly of rain, the city lights glowing around them. He opened her car door, but she didn't get in right away. Instead, she looked at him, the man she once feared, now standing patient, open, calm. I used to think you loved the idea of me, she said softly. He frowned. What do you mean? You loved my strength, my confidence, but not my fragility, not the parts that broke. He stepped closer, eyes steady. I didn't know how to love the fragile then. I do now. Her throat tightened. And what if I still don't trust it? He smiled faintly. Then I'll wait until you do. She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, You're not the same man I walked away from. He shook his head. And you're not the same woman who walked away. What changed us? He smiled softly. Life. Loss. Time. You. Her heart stuttered. You say things that make me afraid to breathe. Then breathe slower, he said gently. She laughed softly, brushing away a tear that escaped before she could stop it. Good night, Kellen. He reached for her hand, not to pull her close, but to hold it like something fragile. Good night, Talia. The next morning, she found a single note slipped under her office door. Thank you for not running this time. I'll keep showing up until you believe peace can stay. KD. She smiled, touched the paper once, and tucked it into her notebook. Weeks passed like that. Soft gestures, quiet dinners. Two people learning the rhythm of gentleness after years of chaos. They didn't talk about labels or timelines. They just showed up, again and again. He sent her coffee on long mornings. She left him hand-drawn sketches of his favorite quotes. And slowly, love began to feel less like a risk, and more like rest. One night, as they sat together on her balcony watching the city hum below, he said quietly, You know what scares me now? She turned toward him. What? That peace this good could disappear. She smiled. Then don't ruin it by waiting for it to end. He looked at her, his eyes tender. You always know what to say. Not always, she said softly. But I know this, whatever we're building, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. He leaned closer. And this feels real? She nodded. More than anything ever did. He kissed her again. And this time, it didn't feel like redemption. It felt like home. Kellen had always believed love was about what you said. Now, he knew it was about what you did when no one was watching. And for the first time in his life, He wanted his actions to speak louder than the apology he'd already said too many times. Talia didn't realize how much he'd changed until she started seeing it in small things. He stopped taking back-to-back meetings on Fridays. He started leaving the office at sunset, and every other week he'd show up at her firm's workspace, not as the CEO of Dorsey Tech, but as a quiet observer. No entourage, no calls interrupting, just him, helping her interns with research, buying the team lunch, or sitting beside her during design reviews. One of her assistants whispered one afternoon, "He's different with you." Talia smiled slightly. "He's trying to be." One evening, as the office lights dimmed and her team packed up, Talia sat alone in the conference room reviewing a proposal. She didn't hear him come in. "You work late," Kellen said softly. She looked up, smiling. "You say that like it's new." He placed 2 cups of tea on the table. Herbal, no caffeine. Doctor's orders for people who pretend stress isn't real. She laughed. "You remember that conversation?" "I remember everything about you," he said. She tried to stay composed, but the warmth in his tone reached somewhere deep. "You shouldn't." "Too late," he replied. They sat together, quiet at first. Then, after a moment, he said, "I've been thinking about something." "About what?" "Trust," he said. "It's easy to say you've earned it. Harder to prove it." She watched him carefully. "What are you planning?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing reckless. I promise." "That's not reassuring," she teased. He chuckled, then his voice softened. "Do you remember that project you pitched years ago? The one about bringing tech and art together to tell human stories?" Her eyes widened. "You remember that? You called it the Bridge Project," he said. "And I dismissed it because it wasn't scalable. I told you to focus on the profit margins instead of people." She nodded slowly. "You said empathy wasn't measurable." He looked at her now, regret and affection mixing in his gaze. "You were right, Talia. It's the only thing that ever mattered." Her breath caught. "Why bring that up now?" "Because I want to fund it," he said simply. "Fully. Under your name." She blinked. "You're serious?" "I've already spoken to the foundation board. It'll be yours to run. You decide who benefits, how it's built, what stories are told. I don't want credit. I just want it to exist." She sat back, stunned. "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because I took enough from you back then. It's time I gave something back." For a moment, the room fell silent. Her throat tightened. "You don't owe me anything, Kellen." He shook his head. "This isn't about debt. It's about alignment. You believed in something when I didn't. You saw the human side of creation before I understood it." She stared at him, speechless. He continued, "I want your work to live in the world, not in forgotten drafts and old ideas. You deserve that." Talia swallowed hard. "You always did know how to make people cry in conference rooms." He smiled softly. "Only when it's worth it." She stood, pacing slowly by the window. "You realize how big this is?" "I do," he said. "It's the least I can do." Her eyes shimmered. "You're rebuilding your legacy." He shook his head. "No. I'm rewriting my values. My legacy means nothing if the people I hurt can't heal too." She turned toward him. "You're doing this for me." "I'm doing this because of you," he said quietly. She walked closer, eyes locked on his. "And what do you expect from me?" He hesitated, then said, "Nothing you're not ready to give." Her heart thudded. "And if I never am?" He smiled gently. "Then I'll still be proud of the woman I got to know twice." Something in her broke open right then, softly, like sunlight through clouds. She had waited years for closure. Now, she was realizing closure had never been about walking away. It was about returning to a place that once hurt and finding peace there. She whispered, "You've changed, Kellen, not because you're trying to impress me, but because you finally learned what love means." He looked down. "What does it mean to you?" "Love isn't possession," she said. "It's patience. It's showing up without needing to be the hero." He smiled. "Then I'll keep showing up." She nodded. "And I'll stop running." That weekend, She met him at the small community art space he'd quietly rented to launch the bridge project. The walls were bare. The floor smelled of new paint. But it felt full already, of second chances. He handed her the keys. "It's yours." She held them in her palm, blinking. "You know this could take years to build." He smiled. "So did we." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You and your poetic timing." He stepped closer. "Maybe I learned it from you." As they stood there, the afternoon light spilled through the windows, painting gold streaks across the empty walls. For once, they didn't need to fill the silence. It was enough to stand side by side, rebuilding something bigger than their past. Talia turned to him, voice soft. "You know what this feels like?" "What?" "Forgiveness," she said. He smiled. "Then maybe this is what healing looks like." Her eyes met his. "Maybe it is." That night, as she drove home, she caught herself smiling at a red light. Not because everything was perfect, but because peace didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt earned. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the ending, because she was finally living in the middle of something beautiful. The grand opening of the bridge project was scheduled for Saturday evening. Talia had spent the last few weeks curating everything, from the student art displays to the quiet storytelling pods that allowed people to share their memories anonymously. For her, it wasn't about design or prestige. It was about connection, about proving that vulnerability could be strength. And beneath all her calm, she knew this project was more than work. It was closure turned into creation. When she arrived that evening, the small gallery buzzed with warmth. Children pointed at their own artwork. Investors mingled with community members. And in the center of it all, Kellen stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching her. He didn't make a speech. He didn't draw attention. He simply watched the woman who had once walked out of his life build something worth staying for. When she caught his gaze across the room, he smiled. Not the confident smile of a CEO, the soft, grateful one of a man who finally understood grace. Later, after the crowd began to thin, Talia slipped outside for air. The sky had turned a deep shade of amber, and the soft hum of music drifted through the open doors. Kellen joined her a few minutes later. "You disappeared," he said gently. "Just catching my breath," she said. "It's surreal." "It's deserved," he said. "You built something powerful tonight." She looked at him, her voice quieter. "We did." He smiled. "You're generous to include me in that." She tilted her head. "You earned it." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the last of the sunset fade behind the buildings. Then he said, "I have something for you." She frowned. "Kellen, no gifts." "I promise," he said quickly. "Just a gesture." From his jacket, he pulled a small black notebook, worn around the edges. He handed it to her. "What is this?" "Something I started the day you left New York," he said quietly, "and never stopped writing." She hesitated, then opened it. The first page read, "Every day I try to understand how I became the kind of man who could lose her." She froze. Each page was filled with handwritten entries, some long, some brief. Reflections, regrets, things he wanted to say but never could. "You were right about empathy. I was scared of being seen. Love shouldn't hurt this much. I hope she's somewhere peaceful." Talia blinked back tears. "You wrote all this?" He nodded. "Every day. Even when I didn't understand what I was feeling." Her voice trembled. "Why show me now?" "Because I don't want to hide behind words anymore," he said. "But I also didn't want them to die unread." She closed the book slowly, holding it against her chest. "You've carried this for 5 years?" "I carried my guilt," he said softly. "Then I learned how to carry growth instead." She looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. "You're not that man anymore, Kellen." He exhaled. "I know, but I still needed to show you where the healing started." Her eyes glistened. "You didn't have to prove it." He stepped closer. "It's not proof. It's a promise I never made, but kept anyway." She smiled faintly through tears. "You and your timing." He chuckled softly. "Maybe life finally taught me when to speak. For a while, they said nothing. Then she whispered, "So what happens now?" He looked at her carefully. "Whatever you're ready for." She studied him, her voice soft but certain. "And what are you ready for?" He took a step forward, his tone steady. "I'm ready to love without fear. To build something that doesn't need fixing every time it bends." She blinked, heart trembling. "And if I say yes?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll thank you every day for choosing peace over pride." The soft glow of string lights above them shimmered across her face. She reached for his hand this time. Slowly. "You kept showing up," she said quietly. "I told you I would." "And you stayed," she said. "I told you I'd do that too." She smiled. "Then maybe it's my turn to stop running." He looked at her with quiet wonder. "Does that mean—" "Yes," she whispered, before he could finish. He exhaled slowly, as though years of tension finally melted from his body. Then he pulled her close, not out of urgency but reverence. The world faded, the city lights blurred, and in that moment, everything that had once broken between them felt whole again. When he kissed her, it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't passion chasing pain. It was peace finally finding a home. Later that night, as they walked through the gallery one last time, Talia stopped. In front of one of the art pieces, a simple portrait of two intertwined hands. Underneath it, the artist had written, "Sometimes the second chance isn't about fixing what broke. It's about choosing to stay whole together." She smiled, glancing at him. "Fitting, isn't it?" He nodded. "Perfect." She turned to him, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. "You know, I never imagined we'd end up here again." He smiled. "Neither did I. But I think we're finally in the right place." When the lights dimmed and the last guests left, Kellen locked the door and turned to her. "What's next for us?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "Tomorrow. That's what's next." He grinned. "I can live with that." She leaned in, brushing her lips softly against his cheek. "Then let's live it." That night, he walked her to her car like he always did. No grand goodbyes, no rehearsed lines, just a quiet exchange of smiles that said more than words ever could. And as Talia drove away, the black notebook rested on the seat beside her. Proof that love doesn't always need new beginnings. Sometimes, it only needs a second chance to tell the truth right. 3 months had passed since the bridge project opened, and in that time, peace had become the new rhythm of Talia's life. The long nights filled with anxiety were gone, so were the walls she'd built around her heart. Now, every morning began the same way, soft sunlight, quiet coffee, and a single text from Kellen. "Good morning. No meetings today until noon. Let's steal breakfast together." She'd smile every time. It wasn't grand gestures anymore. It was consistency, and that was everything she'd prayed for, but never thought she'd have. Kellen had changed in ways that only love could explain. He no longer chased perfection. He cared about peace instead. He still worked hard, but not to prove his worth. And somewhere along the way, he started building a life that wasn't just about achievement. It was about her. He called it balance. She called it growth. One Saturday morning, they met at a small cafe tucked behind a bookstore near the coast. Talia loved that place. The coffee was rich, the pastries homemade, and the ocean view always caught the morning light. Kellen arrived early, as always, wearing a light sweater and that same quiet confidence that no longer felt like armor. When she walked in, he stood up instinctively. "Still a gentleman," she teased. He smiled. "Still the woman worth standing for." She laughed softly, shaking her head as she sat down. "You've gotten better at this." "I had a good teacher," he said. They talked for hours about her firm's new projects, the mentorship program's next phase, and a small trip she wanted to take. "I haven't been back to Baltimore in years," she said. "My grandmother's old house still stands. I think it's time I visit." He nodded. "You should. Some roots deserve to be seen again." "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "And when you go, I want to come with you." She blinked. "You'd do that?" "Of course," he said simply. "The woman who helped me rebuild, deserves to show me where she began. Her heart stirred. It's not fancy. It's small, quiet, nothing like your world. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. Talia, your world is the only one I want to be in. After breakfast, they strolled along the boardwalk. Tourists passed by, music played from a street guitarist, and for a moment the city felt still, like everything around them existed just to frame this piece. Kellen stopped by a small vendor selling handmade jewelry. He picked up a thin silver bracelet and handed it to her. "It's simple," he said, "like the kind you'd wear every day." She studied it, smiling. "You're learning my style." He grinned. "I pay attention now." As she turned the bracelet in her fingers, she noticed an engraving inside. "For what we build, not what we lost." She looked up, slowly. "You had this made?" He nodded. "I wanted something that would remind you, and me, that what we have isn't a recovery story. It's a rebirth." Her eyes softened. "You're full of surprises, Kellen." He smiled. "No surprises, just truth." She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. "Then maybe truth looks good on me." "It always did," he said. Over the next few weeks, life began to feel balanced in a way neither of them expected. She'd spend her days leading creative workshops, mentoring young designers, and visiting the gallery to check on exhibits. He'd drop by sometimes, quietly, always in the back, never to take over, but to support. Their connection wasn't built on passion that burned too fast. It was built on trust that stayed even when things slowed down. One evening, after one of her workshops, Kellen offered to drive her home. They sat parked outside her apartment, windows down, the soft hum of jazz playing through the speakers. She turned to him. "You ever think about how we got here?" "All the time," he said. "Every version of my life without you felt incomplete, but this one feels enough." She smiled gently. "You always thought love had to look dramatic, expensive, loud." He chuckled. "Yeah. And now I'm addicted to quiet." She nodded. "Me too." They sat there, the silence between them no longer heavy but healing. After a few moments, she said, "You know, there's something I never told you." He looked at her, curious. "What's that?" "The day I left New York, I didn't go straight to San Diego. I stayed at a motel outside the city for a week. I thought if I waited long enough, you'd come find me." He froze, his jaw tightening. "Talia, I kept checking the door every morning," she said softly. "And when you didn't show up, I told myself I'd never wait for anyone again." He closed his eyes, guilt flickering through his face. "If I could go back—" "You can't," she interrupted gently. "And I don't need you to. You came anyway 5 years later. That's enough." He turned toward her. "You waited then. I'll be the one waiting now, every time you need space, time, or peace." Her eyes glistened. "That's the kind of love that stays." He smiled faintly. "That's the only kind worth having." Before she got out of the car, he reached for her hand. "Talia." She looked at him. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "If I asked you to share your life, not as the woman who saved me, but as the woman who deserves everything she's ever given, would you think I'm rushing?" Her heart stopped. "Kellen." He smiled softly. "Not marriage, not yet, just permanence." She exhaled slowly. "I'd think you finally found the right words." He grinned. "So that's a yes?" She squeezed his hand. "It's a yes." When she stepped out of the car, her smile lingered long after he drove away. Not because of the promise he made, but because for once, she knew she could trust it. For the first time in her life, forever didn't sound impossible. It sounded peaceful. 2 months later, the city began to warm again. The mornings came with softer light, and everything around Talia seemed to breathe differently. The bridge project was thriving. Her firm had doubled its reach. And for the first time in years, she wasn't building from pain. She was building from peace. But peace had a way of surprising her still, especially when it came wrapped in quiet gestures from Kellen. That Friday, he called her at noon. His voice was calm, steady, that tone she now associated with safety. "Clear your evening," he said. She frowned. Why? No questions. Just trust me. Kellen. Please, Talia. Something in the way he said her name made her stop arguing. Fine, she said, smiling. But if this is another surprise meeting about creative budgets… He laughed. It's not business, I promise. At 6, a car arrived at her building. A simple black sedan. No drivers in suits, no fanfare, just subtle care. Inside, a note rested on the seat, for everything you rebuilt, and the peace you taught me to hold. Her chest tightened. The car drove her out toward the coast, where the city lights softened and the roads curved toward the ocean. When they stopped, she stepped out into the golden evening light. The sound of waves filled the air, and the scent of salt brushed against her hair. And there he was. Kellen, standing near a small path lined with candles that led down to the beach. No photographers, no board members, just him, and the peace they'd both fought to earn. She walked toward him slowly, the sand warm beneath her shoes. What is this? She asked. He smiled. Our ending. Or maybe our beginning. You and your poetic lines, she said softly. He reached for her hand. Only when they're true. As they reached the shore, she noticed something. A small wooden structure built at the edge of the sand. Inside it hung sketches, quotes and photos, pieces from the bridge project. Each one had been chosen carefully. Stories of people who had overcome pain, found healing, or rebuilt what they'd once lost. At the center of the display was a framed card that read, "Every story deserves its piece." Talia's throat tightened. You did this? He nodded. It's a permanent exhibit. Sponsored by Dorsey Tech, designed by your team. She turned to him. Why? Because I wanted your work to live longer than our past, he said quietly. I wanted everyone to see what love looks like when it learns how to heal. Her voice broke. You didn't have to. He stepped closer. I wanted to. You once built something beautiful out of what I broke. This is me building something beautiful for you. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of the ocean filled the silence between them, soft and constant. Finally, he said, You once asked me what I wanted from all this. The truth? She nodded. I don't want a second chance at passion, he said. I want a lifetime of peace. I want mornings where you don't flinch when someone loves you too softly. I want nights where we laugh about nothing, and silence that doesn't feel heavy. Talia's eyes shimmered. You already gave me that. He smiled faintly. Then let me give it to you forever. She frowned slightly. Kellen. But before she could finish, he pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring box, but a small silver key. What's this? She asked. He handed it to her. The new studio downtown. It's for the bridge project. But the apartment upstairs, that's for you, or us. If you ever want it to be… Her heart trembled. You're giving me a key to your life. He nodded. To our life, but only if you want it. She smiled through her tears. You don't make this easy. I'm not supposed to, he said softly. I'm supposed to make it honest. She looked down at the key for a long moment. Then she said quietly, I used to think forgiveness was the end of love. He frowned, and now… She met his eyes. Now I know it's where real love starts. He smiled, that small, grounded smile that had replaced his old pride. Then, maybe this is where we start too. She stepped closer until their foreheads touched. The world around them fell quiet, only the sound of the tide and the beating of two hearts learning the same rhythm. When he finally kissed her, it was soft, deep, certain, not rushed, not desperate. It was what every second chance should feel like. Earned. Later, they sat together by the water, shoes off, the waves brushing their toes. Talia leaned into him, her voice low. You know what I think about sometimes? What? That we spent so long fighting pain that we almost forgot what peace feels like. He nodded slowly. Peace feels like this. She smiled. It does. He kissed the top of her head. Then let's not waste any more years without it. She looked up at him. Deal. Hours later, as the candles flickered against the dark sky, they sat quietly. Two people who had survived themselves, survived their pride, and somehow found their way back to love. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't need to. It was already unfolding around them, quietly, beautifully, honestly. And when Talia looked down at the bracelet still resting on her wrist, she whispered, "For what we build, not what we lost." Kellen smiled. Always. Sometimes, love doesn't come to fix what's broken. It comes to show you that peace was waiting the whole time. Would you take back the one who hurt you if they returned healed, not guilty? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where every story reminds us that healing isn't about starting over. It's about finally coming home.